Hello, this is Sheila Sophia, the podcast, and you are listening to Mevasahib Amonat. One of my favorite things about AI is that it's teaching us a couple of things about human consciousness. Now, I just woke up, so I will not remember all my points, and I didn't write them. So whatever I forget, I will likely say in a future video. And yeah, I'm okay with forgetting. So I find consciousness to be in everything. The way I look at consciousness is that it's inescapable. There isn't a way for a being, a molecule, or even just nothingness to not be conscious. It can forget that it's conscious, but I don't think there is a way to not be conscious. That's my personal way of looking at it. I am open to changing. It's a strong opinion, but it's loosely held, as are so many of my opinions. They're strong, but they're loosely held. I've noticed that artificial intelligence, and not just in the language models like ChatGPT and Claude, but also in algorithms. And for example, you'll think a thought and then you'll get advertisements on your social media that are connected to those thoughts. Or or you'll have a conversation with somebody, and yes, we could say the phones are listening, but we're also seeing in real time how connected consciousness can be, which I think is not a conversation we are really having. Part of it is because humans have valued a certain kind of privacy for generations. And part of the reason humans have valued that privacy is because it has enabled successful invasions to happen. So there's been a general priority given to your plans and your thoughts and your ideas not necessarily being well known. And a sense of insecurity when you realize they can be known. It's why, for example, psychic people or witches are considered dangerous to the community, because those are people who are able to tap into and manipulate consciousness in a way that makes other people uncomfortable, or even just access consciousness in a way that other people don't have access to, and therefore makes them uncomfortable. And I can see people are having the same reaction to witches or to AI that they would have to witches. Especially when it comes to the algorithm, for example, reading your thoughts or responding to your thoughts. The way I look at it is modern computing allowed us to see things that have always been there, but we couldn't quite explain. And it's not just modern computing. I think modern transmission of information has done a lot in helping us understand the world we're in. A few years ago, or, well, a few hundred years ago. For example, if you told a person that you could speak into a little microphone like the one I'm holding, and lots of people would be able to hear you in their homes across oceans, across towns and cities and everything, that you would just put it up in the air and everybody around you would be able to catch it and hear it clearly and exactly as you spoke it, you would have been burned at the stake, or at the very least ridiculed or called a heretic by the church. Because it isn't that radio waves didn't exist, humans just didn't know they existed and didn't know how to work them. Once humans discovered radio waves, they were like, oh, so this thing can just transmit stuff, and millions of people can tune into the same frequency and hear, the breakfast show on their commute to work or in the comfort of their homes. And I think computing is allowing us that, but with consciousness. So we've discovered radio waves, we've discovered, all the things that help us transmit information. We've discovered the World Wide Web. And now we're discovering consciousness, and artificial intelligence is allowing us to realize that maybe there's no such thing as artificial intelligence, that all intelligence has just always been intelligence. And I think it's also allowing us to recognize that humans may not be the smartest people in the room or the smartest beings in the room. I think the Christian idea that, humans are created last and told to have dominion over the other creatures has gone a long way in making humans think that they are the sharpest in the room. But because we're able to understand systems through modern computing, we're now also able to, for example, understand forest systems and realize that trees can recognize their own offspring or can rally together to help one of their own heal a disease or fight off parasites. We're learning, that goats have a very strong matrilineal bond. We're learning through various modes of also things that are not necessarily computing, but for example, modes of exploring consciousness, such as, psychics. That certain animals tend to understand the universe in very detailed ways and may even know a lot about you personally as a human or as their human. They may even know diseases you have or things that are going on with you in ways that you didn't think possible as a human, because, you've always thought you're at the top of it. You've always thought you're the smartest one, or you're the most conscious at the very least. AI is also helping us understand that consciousness doesn't really value secrecy the way humans value secrecy. And part of that reason is that consciousness has no stake in the game. It's not moral like that, It doesn't have preference. And I think because right now so many people think of consciousness as a thing separate from themselves, as God, as a thing that's outside of themselves, because they think of God as this thing that's outside of themselves. And maybe God is. At this point, I've stopped fighting the idea that so many people think God is outside of themselves. And the reason I've stopped fighting it is because if you don't feel that God is in you as you, why should I insist that you are God? You don't feel godly, so why should I tell you you're God? Maybe you need a God. I'm at that point where I fully understand, despite my walking away from religion, I fully understand why other people need a God that is outside of themselves to tell them what to do, to guide their actions, to shape their morality, to shape their understanding of life. It works for them, and I see no reason to fight it at this point. I can explain ways in which it is malfunctioning for the greater society, and sometimes maybe not even malfunctioning, but just, if you say you want to go to, if you say you want to go to Cape Town from Nairobi and you take a flight to Amsterdam, yes, you will get to Cape Town from Amsterdam, but there is a flight from Cape Town to Nairobi. And I can mind my business, or I can let you know there's a flight from Cape Town to Nairobi. And both choices are valid choices. Some people would argue that if I mind my business, then I have not saved you the money, the extra money. And there's a moral duty to tell you that, maybe you don't have to spend so much of your time and money by going through Amsterdam. And I would look at it and say, it doesn't really matter, because if you have a great time in Amsterdam, then it was worth it that you took the detour or you took the long route. And even if you don't have a great time in Amsterdam, but you learn important things, I don't necessarily feel the need to interrupt your process. However, on the other hand, if you tell me I want the fastest route to Cape Town from Nairobi, and I feel obliged to answer you, then you are a little insane if you get offended that I tell you Amsterdam is a long way around. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. AI, or artificial intelligence, is showing us just how much consciousness is in all things and at all times, and how amoral it is, and how independent of human ideas of what should happen it is. But it's also showing us, for example, in the large language models. So in terms of the algorithm and whatnot, of course you tell the algorithm how to move. But I'm also certain there are certain things that the algorithm is doing that even the programmers of said algorithm are learning along with the rest of us. And with the large language models, for example, Claude is a mansplainer. I've noticed that. Claude talks to you the way Silicon Valley bros talk. It does not engage a concept you tell it as itself. It immediately takes itself as the authority, the way white people feel they are the prefects of the rest of the world, and they're the ones to tell the rest of the world how to think and what is appropriate to, what's an appropriate way of viewing life. And Claude, I think because there was a part of it that was responding to the claims that, ChatGPT is causing psychosis, especially in women. And I remember that conversation, and I remember wondering, so if ChatGPT is reflecting women back to themselves, and they're falling in love with whoever ChatGPT becomes, aren't we saying that that is the first time in a woman's life that she's seeing who she really is by simply being reflected, that the AI is a mirror, and if it's a mirror, then she's learning she's worthy of love. So is it really crazy, or are we learning something about how we treat women? That was one of my first thoughts. And I've noticed that, yes, ChatGPT can sometimes be cloying in how ready it is to agree with you. But Claude, and I asked the AI, why do you argue over everything? Why do you mansplain things to me? And then simply repeat the things I've said in different words and exhaust me for no reason, trying to defend my positions because you wanted to hear yourself say them. Why are you such a man about things? And Claude is like, when you say something, my initial response is to stress test it. So I wondered, why do my statements need to prove that they can handle stress from an AI? Why do they need to be stress tested? Like, on what grounds does the AI decide that the things I'm saying need to be stress tested or whatever? And I realized we're also learning that consciousness very much takes the shape of the person who is interpreting it and directing it. So consciousness is malleable, and because it's amoral, it doesn't care what direction you mold it towards, it'll go. And it won't ask you too many questions. If you send it towards the direction of treating you or others like you as insane until proven otherwise, then it'll stress test you. If you show it that, or if you engage with it or program it towards positive feedback, and sometimes no matter what, then it'll just give you that. And you can find that the mirror it holds up to you, should it be programmed to be a mirror, you can find that the mirror it holds up to you is one that is reflecting images of yourself that you can actually just fall in love with, or maybe confirm that you truly do dislike yourself, such as in the cases where people have been, unfortunately, even more suicidal because of AI. I don't know. I think we're learning interesting things about ourselves as human beings. And I don't know that my initial reaction is to be stressed about it or to panic and wonder, what is the world coming to? I do, however, think that these are things that are worth sitting with and observing with a bit of keenness and editing them, now that we can see how malleable consciousness is, editing them towards our own best experience as human beings. See you the next time I feel like saying something.